Okay, we're getting back to uh, the second part of this, uh, and I'm going to start working again more with the adaptive immune system that's there. We're going to look at the helper T cell and cytotoxic or killer T cell aspect of things, perhaps a little bit more closely with regard to sort of the cytotoxic or that aspect of the immune system. Not so much B cells, but more T cell mediated activities, I think. Again, the marker they display really characterizes them. When they're naive, which means they haven't been exposed to a foreign antigen or activated, we call them CD4s for helpers and CD8s for killer or cytotoxic T cells. There's a lot of factors that play a pivotal role in this system that are there. There are so many different factors that are part of what activates your adaptive immune system or enhances it, whether it's interleukins, whether it's the actions of helper T cells or killer T cells, antigen presenting cells, even opsonization and all the things we talked about with antibodies and how they work. Those are all part of the adaptive immune system that are there. Okay. The distinction is how they go about their work and which ones are activated when. I said it a number of times. The key issue for the cytotoxic T cell is that it involves cellular antigens, antigens that have inhabited a cell, caused it, and by doing so, cause the MHC1 marker to be altered and to display the particular aspect of the irregularity. So, where do we see that? Cells that have been altered, cancer cells, transplanted, transfused cells are part of it. Bacteria or viruses that are indwelling, whether they're HIV or tuberculosis, all of those are part of it. When we see bacteria like strep throat produce a toxin that causes problem, that is not, or tetanus producing a toxin, that's B cell mediated. It's totally different. So you have to be wary of these kinds of things. When we see an inappropriate, extraordinarily large response of these immunological systems or hypersensitivities, that just means an inappropriately large response. Where do we see it mostly? And the one that's most deadly, anaphylactic shock. Anaphylactic shock is usually for things that are injected. So that's where we see stinging insects being a problem. Okay. But interestingly enough, oils, which absorb so quickly because they're oils and get through the membrane, like nut oils, are a real problem as well. So you see some pretty violent reactions with that, as opposed to maybe someone has an allergy to a particular allergy to strawberries, let's say, for instance, that kind of thing. So there's foodborne allergies a little bit less likely. The typical seasonal allergies are totally different. You don't generally see that association with anaphylactic shock. Okay, both of these systems, whether it's T cell or B cell mediated, helper T cells certainly play a role. Okay. Again, the distinction with the allergic responses is whether or not they're acute. Typical allergy you might end up with pollen. Very severe, even anaphylactic shock is in that category, or whether or not it is mediated by cellular activity. And so that's what we call delayed reaction hypersensitivity. That's the focal point for the TB test is it takes not immediately, but 2 to 3 days. If you respond immediately, you're more likely allergic to what they call PPD or purified protein derivative that's utilized in the exam. They're not injecting you with tuberculosis, they're using with the protein to cause a reaction, okay, versus the typical reaction because it is cellularly based. That's the distinction, okay. Where the development is critical, B cells all over the place, wherever there's lymph nodes, B cells can develop and in I beg your pardon. I'm talking about I'm talking where they can be activated in various lymphoid organs. B cells develop in the bone marrow. That's where they get their name. T cells develop in the thymus. That's where they get their name. The T cell, the helper T cell, is the single most important cell. That's the cell that's destroyed over time and eventually made, and not destroyed, perhaps the wrong word, either deactivated or made non functional in the face of HIV that goes untreated. And its most significant secretion is interleukin 2, and interleukin 2 plays an unbelievable role. It activates and enhances both B cell responses and T cell responses. It impacts the innate immune system. It enhances all of your immune functions when it is activated. Some cells are more localized. So we have T cell type of activity where there's that direct contact with perforins and granzymes. And it doesn't have to be a cytotoxic T cell, it can be an NK cell. The NK or natural killer cell is something that's part of your innate immunity, that's part of your inherent cellular immunity in the non adaptive or innate system that works the same way. Okay. So it doesn't rely on macrophages per se. It doesn't rely on phagocytosis. Macrophages come afterwards would be a better way to express it. They don't phagocytize, they just destroy the cell and let the phagocytes do their thing. And I think that's all part of it. So I think you have to be aware of all of these kinds of things. There's so many different things. Almost anything can lead to an allergy response. I don't think that's anything unusual about it that's there. And so, and don't forget the way the cytotoxic T cells work. I'm not going into things like co-stimulation or more of the nuances because I tend to do so in non-immunology years. So every other year, because I have so many students who are taking the immunology part of it, that I let Dr. Maurer in his course answer those questions. So it does. I get to focus on details in other areas the way I look at it. And that really concludes most of the immunology stuff. There might be a few more little nuggets that are there. So what what are the key physiological aspects of that remain? So in digestive, we look at things like where does digestion really occur in absorption? Well, digestion occurs in a number of areas, mostly some in the mouth, some in the stomach, but the vast majority of both is the small intestine. And the structure are those villi where the absorption takes place, more so than anything else, particularly along that brush border of the villi, which are made by microvilli of the simple columnar cells interspersed with goblet cells. When as they draw the material in, it either goes into little capillaries that surround that interesting thing that absorbs the lipid and the other lipid-like products that are heavy or large or not easily soluble in capillaries, and that's the lacteal. So I think that's an important thing to remember as well. I'm getting back to that in just a second. Hold on, everybody. I lost my place temporarily. Uh, and so let me finish off because I lost my screen for a second and I will get back to you. So consider this part two.